So, how did we end up here? How did we end up here chatting about bikes and cycling? And how does this all relate to my 2024 goal involving the Gran Fondo National Series? Hey there. I'm just another John Q. Public on a bike, or Joshua Q. Cyclist, if you will. Get it? JQC? It's a little clever. I'm not a pro. I'm not an expert. I'm not even a bike mechanic. So why am I sitting here talking to you about cycling and the journey that I set myself on? I'm one of who knows how many out there who love to ride their bike, go fast, and want to challenge themselves, but they're not racers. There's no team, no fancy bus or army of trainers and mechanics, big budgets and all that. Just someone who gets that thrill of freedom on the bike and wants to challenge themselves to something new. So how about a quick little adventure with the Wayback Machine? You see, some of my earliest memories are of being strapped into a bike seat on the back of one of my parents' bikes and going for rides in the neighborhood. I was in one seat and my brother was in the other. I'd like to say, I remember the feeling of freedom out on the bike, the wind in my hair and the world passing me by. But come on, I was 4? I don't remember the feeling of being on the bike, let alone feeling free and the world passing me. I just remember they wanted to go for a ride and, they carted us along with them. So next in my evolution of riding were big wheels. And there's really two things that I remember from those. One, those who had the handbrake on the big wheels had the coolest big wheels in the neighborhood. You could easily skid down the street while pulling that handbrake. It was kind of sweet, you know? The other thing I remember most had absolutely nothing to do with riding the big wheels. Instead, we would turn it over, sit on it upside down, and spin the wheels by hand at the pedals. And for some reason, we're calling out, "Ice cream, ice cream." I don't really know where that part came from. I think it was like we were pretending that we were making the ice cream with the wheel. I don't know, but at the time it made sense. Fast forward to the BMX bike phase that every kid, at least every kid I knew at the time, went through. I had a cool bike that had removable pads, and I would tinker with it all the time. I'd adjust the seat height, the handlebar angle, and, that was really about it. But I felt like a mechanic. I felt like I was making a difference to the bike. I remember riding around with my friends, and we would pretend we were secret agents, and these bikes were outfitted with state-of-the-art technology. The opening in the handlebars was where we had a magic screen, where HQ would call us when they needed us to spring into action and save the day. Well, and now, today, we've got these transparent TVs that are starting to hit the market. So it's kind of like we were visionaries or something. We had buttons on the screen that would call people or do different things. And, of course, the grips, had buttons we could fire missiles and leave an oil slick, do a booster. You name it, we had it. There was no freewheeling on this bike. No rear brake on the handlebar. Just pedal back hard enough and you get a sweet skid, especially on dirt and gravel. On-road, off-road, riding a track, or making your own ramps to see how far we can jump without falling and getting hurt too badly. That was a good day. Eventually, I upgraded to a bike with a handbrake, and there was nothing cooler than going down the road and pedaling backwards for really no reason at all other than, just to do it. Heck, I still do that today just to let the younger me have a little fun. When I started to outgrow the bike, I didn't really ride it much for fun. It just turned into a mode of transportation to the fun, but it wasn't really the fun itself anymore. Around this time, my dad introduced me to riding a 10-speed bike. Now that was a big jump from what I was used to. Multiple gears and 2 brakes? See, my mom wasn't riding anymore, so he started taking me out for rides, him on his bike and me on my mom's. Aside from it being a bigger bike and having all the gears, I really didn't see the advantage over this bike from the one I had. And then we started to go a little faster. Once I was able to get used to the gears and the shifting, this is back in the old friction shifter days, I started to see what some of the fuss was about. It was a little fun. For a bit, I would ride around on her bike, and even then I wasn't doing it for fun, but to get me from point A to point B. The bike's existence in my head was completely utilitarian, but like any budding cyclist, I had my eyes on my next bike. I wanted to ride the bike that my dad was riding. It was cooler, more industrial looking. It just seemed like I needed to be on it. Of course, the issue there was that my dad was much taller than I was at the time. So to get on that thing, I had to walk the bike to the house on the corner because that yard had an incline to it. I was able to use that hill yard to kind of get myself high enough so that I can angle the bike just right for me to swing my leg over, push off, and pedal before I started falling over. Yeah, it might have taken a time or two to get it right. Now I was cruising and looking like a pro. Not that I knew what looking like a pro meant at the time. I was completely ignorant of bike racing, the tour, or anything like that. All I knew now was that I was on a real bike and being awesome. Of course, the one thing I didn't realize were that the brakes were reversed on the handlebars compared to my mom's bike. The friction shifters were still the same, but the all-important brakes were different. You see, my mom has MS, and so one side of her body is stronger than her other, so the brakes were switched so she could have better control of the bike. Yeah, one of the first times I grabbed a handful of brakes and the back tire lifted off the ground was a little scary. Fortunately, it didn't take long for me to adjust because it wasn't like I had years of experience on one style and had to retrain my brain to use different hands. It was when I started to really use these 10 speeds. Remember, this wasn't a 10-speed cassette. No, this was a 5-speed cassette with 2 chain rings on the front. A far cry from the 22 and 24 speeds we're rocking nowadays. Anyway, even though I was really only riding these for transportation, it was the 10 speeds that not only gave me the free feeling that I had with the BMX-style bike, but it introduced a new level of enjoyment and adventure. I guess you could say a more grown-up adventure compared to the super secret spy adventures I was having on the other bikes. I don't know. Can't quite explain it, but I knew that this was where it was at least for me. And yet, my preteen, early teen mind wasn't allowing me to see past the utilitarian approach of riding a bike. When I learned to ride these more adult bikes, we were living in a pretty flat part of the country and riding was easy, effortless, and it was really just around the neighborhoods. It was when we moved to a more hilly place where the neighborhoods were more spread out and disjointed that I really learned the importance of and embraced the shifting capabilities. Where we were in Utah, there wasn't a lot of flatness, and to get to the flat areas, you had to do some climbing. Or enjoy a little downhill action, but then that meant climbing back up to get home. Funny enough, this was where I started to get on the bike to ride, just to ride. I didn't have a place to go, I just wanted to get out and go. I'd leave the house, make a right, and then another right, and then keep on going straight, which led me straight to a hill that was a pain. Keep in mind, this is probably the 14-year-old me looking at this thing and thinking it was a mountain. We were right near the mountain, so it isn't like there wasn't an incline. I'm just curious as to how much of a climb it really was. Maybe I'll look it up on Google or something. Grinding up that hill with the cars whooshing by me, I was turning those cranks with all that I had. Huffing and puffing, but damn if I didn't get to that turnoff point where I felt safe, where I could turn around and go back down the hill. I didn't want to go too far up the hill or get lost. Remember, this was the age where cell phones weren't quite a thing yet. Yeah, they were up and coming, but only the really rich or important people had them. Getting to that turnoff, I had the happy, accomplished feeling. How many people can say they climbed up this hill just because, just for the fun of it? Okay, I'm sure there were a lot of cyclists climbing that stretch, just not when I was. And of course, if I didn't see anybody else doing it, then that meant nobody else was doing it. Little side note, I'm a terrible climber now, and I think it's hilarious that I was purposely doing these hills as a show-off type of thing, if the younger me could see me now. This level of enjoyment never really went away. Having tired legs because I was out riding all day was a great feeling. I didn't know anyone else who felt the same way, and so I wasn't able to explore cycling beyond my own little adventures. No one really talked about cycling or road bikes or anything like that, at least not in my circles. So it was like a secret hobby or something, I guess. Just a way to pass the time, but it was just for me. The summer before my senior year, I had to move across the country, and while that wasn't ideal, I did have a bike available to me. I might not have known anyone outside of a few neighbors, but that was okay because I had the bike and I could just go riding. I could hop on the bike and just go for a few hours and just enjoy. The school year started up, so that meant that the cycling I was doing kind of went away. So to combat that, I had the crazy idea that I'd get up early in the morning, go for a little ride, and then get myself together and go to school. Sure, I did give it a go and was successful a few times, but that wasn't sustainable. I was the type of kid that would want to stay in bed until the very last minute and then rush, chaos, frantic, just to get out the door and get the day started. As I made more connections and friends, the riding dwindled even more. None of the new people I knew rode bikes of any kind. We were juniors and seniors in high school, so cars were the way to go. Faster, easier, and we looked cooler in them. So, once again, the bike riding fell off the radar again. This time around, it stayed off the radar for a long time. Fast forward about 15 years or so. Started hanging out with friends and friends of friends, and the discussion of cycling popped up. Seems these friends of friends liked to go riding, him especially. Not only did they like riding, but they also would watch the Tour de France and keep up with everything dealing with bikes. It was kind of cool. They were way beyond me with their knowledge, but I could at least connect with I like to ride bikes too. The only problem was I hadn't ridden in, 15 years or so? And I didn't have a bike. So one day Scott tells me he has this old bike that I could ride if I wanted to go riding with him. Thinking back to my younger days, I'm going, hell yeah, I can do that. We meet up and we hit the trails. I'm on this super heavy bike, not a road bike, but that's okay. A bike's a bike, right? They're all the same. Maybe not exactly. He asks, well, hey, how far out do I want to go? And again, I think back when I could spend all day out on the bike, and I said, whatever you're up for, I'm up for. What was it Dirty Harry said? A man's got to know his limitations, and on that day, I hadn't a clue about mine. I was thinking, I'd just hop on the bike, get the pedaling, and it would be just like when I was a kid. So off we went. I was huffing and puffing and trying to keep up with him as much as I could. And while I never did cry uncle, I think Scott saw it on my face, took pity on me after a while, and suggested we turn around because our better halves were waiting on us. And it was on the way back that I fully hit the wall and lost it. Cramped legs and everything just stopped working. We hobbled back to the house, and this humbling and embarrassing experience gave me that motivation to get back in the saddle and build back up, or at least build up in general, my cycling abilities. We made getting together on the weekends a regular thing, and I started improving. I went out and bought a new bike, new shoes, fancy pedals. This was my first experience with clipless pedals after a lifetime of flats and toe clips. I'd been transformed from a guy on a bike to a cyclist for the first time. I even had a little bike computer to tell me my speed, what time it was, my cadence, how long I'd been riding. Surely I was more pro than ever. And yeah, I was, but not even close compared to so many other people I saw out on the trails. But at the time, I didn't really care. I had a cool looking bike that was different than others because this was a white bike, and who has a white bike? They're so much harder to keep clean because they show every smudge and dirt and grime. But it stood out from the rest, and that was good enough for me. I went online and found a blue saddle because blue's my favorite color, and surely a saddle is a saddle is a saddle, right? No. I even started to watch the Tour de France. Now, at the time, Carrie, my wife, and I were working with a few other people, and we were running a nonprofit magazine in our spare time, and, well, this ate up pretty much our entire spare time. Around the time I started cycling with Scott, the magazine was starting to wind down. So, with the new brain space and free time available, I instead dove headfirst into the cycling world. I started watching any YouTube video I could and learned all about the cool tech, the gadgets, people, bikes, the races, basically anything to do with road cycling I could. I wanted to know it all and be part of it all. I basically traded one expensive hobby, the magazine, for another expensive hobby. Only this time I wasn't able to share the cost of everything with 5 or 6 other people. My next step into this cycling addiction was to sign up for organized charity rides. I was doing rides that were raising money for diabetes, feeding the hungry, helping kids in need, and of course, MS. This community of riders on all sorts of bikes and skill levels all going out on the road together, having this shared experience, even if they didn't know anybody else, but doing it all at the same time. This was where it was at. It was at these events that I learned no matter how pro I think I might be or look, I really wasn't. It was here that I learned that I was just your average John Q. Public level cyclist, or, well, as I like to say now, Joshua Q. cyclist. I was an average cyclist, but that's okay. But I wanted to get better. I wanted to be better, stronger, have better gear, all the good things. I was watching GCN videos and thinking to myself, yeah, how do I get my hands on those zip wheels? That could really help me. Or man, that Orbea Orca, that's what I should be riding. I coveted anything that was newer and flashier than what I had. Sure, I didn't have the budget for any of it, but that didn't stop me from wanting to have it within arm's reach just to be that much better out on the trail. But getting faster really is the goal, right? It doesn't get easier, you just go faster. And I wanted that faster, that better average speed, that climbing on a smaller gear than whomever else I'm riding with, that competition. So I started to do online training with Sufferfest. I was training, I was commuting on my bike, I was doing charity rides, going out on the weekends with friends, watching bike races. Yep, this is where it was at. Of course, everything ebbs and flows, even hobbies we're fanatically passionate about. In the last couple of years, my time on the bike and out with friends has really taken a downturn. I don't think Scott and I went out at all last year on the bike together. And aside from some organized rides, I didn't really get out on the trails either. I found it very easy to just say, I'll go for a spin tomorrow. But tomorrow never really came. There's always an easy excuse. I even stopped doing the training sessions because I wasn't really training for anything. I mean, excuses are very easy to come by, remember. This past fall, I said enough's enough. I started to figure out, how do I dig myself out of this hole that I've dug myself into? I already had a goal of doing a bike MS ride in as many states as I can, but I needed something more than that because those bike MS rides were only once a year. I needed something that would truly challenge me. I needed a goal that would take most, if not all year, to work on. And that's when I started looking at competing in the Gran Fondo National Series. This was something I could work on all year long and keep myself engaged. And because of that goal, that's what's led us to right here. To keep myself in check and on track, I thought, well, why not document the journey along the way? Share what I've learned, how I'm coming along, and what I'm struggling with. But you know what? Those extra details are going to have to wait until the next episode. Thanks for taking this little cafe stop with me. Thanks for listening, and let's continue this soon.